survivors, and welcome to First Aid Spray, a Resident Evil podcast by fans for fans. This is episode 21, and in this edition we'll be covering our latest return to Raccoon City in the newly released Resident Evil 3 Remake. My name is Cyniac, you can just call me Cy, and joining me on the panel this week, if the world says you're not worthwhile, like the Hunter Gamma, he'll take you down to the sewers and feed you snacks. It's Moist Outlet, aka James.
Hi!
Sidestepping his way back onto the podcast after perfectly dodging having to talk about two Paul W.S. Anderson films, it's Serial Box 64, Jordan Sugru.
Hey, how you doing?
And don't worry, he's UBCS. If that stands for Ultimate Broadcasting Co-Pilot Steve, it's Firebutton Steve Valance.
Good afternoon/morning.
This episode of the podcast, like all others, was recorded live, as you can tell, in our Discord server. Join now to hear the podcast early and unedited, as well as engage with our community, contribute to the show and other upcoming projects, and be informed first of everything going on behind the scenes. You can find a link to the server in the description of this podcast or on our social media accounts. Right, housekeeping, numero uno, number one. We got a big, I feel like every time we do an episode now, we got a big episode. This one's going to be big. So, housekeeping, special thanks to our latest Patreon. So, a special thank you to Combo for supporting the show. In terms of new content, YouTube, we've put out some more videos. 5 more times the Resident Evil series has wasted potential. That's come out, and literally days after recording this, we're dropping a 5 things you may have missed from Resident Evil 3 Remake. Most importantly, the trailer is now out for Resident Evil The Beginning. We talked about it on the show a few months ago. It's the fan dub that we've put together of the 1997 book, Resident Evil The Book in the US, and Biohazard The Beginning in Japan. Trailer is out now. Give that a watch/listen. It's going to be a purely audio dub. Those episodes are coming together. You can look forward to those in the future on our YouTube channel as well. And very special thank you to everyone who's been a part of that in the editing phase, in the casting phase. It's been a joy to work on, and we're very excited to be joined by Joe White, the voice of Chris Redfield from the Resident Evil 2002 remake, in a cameo role, and to do a classic title call like he did on all the GameCube games. That's very exciting indeed, so please look forward to that sometime this year. It's coming together. Don't want to put a date on it just yet, but keep your eyes peeled. In terms of housekeeping, I think that's it. Let's dive into a pretty hefty dose of news.
Okay, so our first, and perhaps, honestly, to my heart, and Sherwin, Team Forge Games announced Resident Evil 3, the board game, which is kickstarting on April 28th.
Yeah, very exciting. I mean, some of us have kind of known a little bit about this behind the scenes, obviously, but it's very exciting to have that news out there now. I don't know if we need to talk about it too much at the moment. We got some stuff behind the scenes. We're working on that, obviously. We're going to be talking about that more in the ongoing, weeks and stuff, and even months moving forward. But yeah, keep your eyes peeled over on the Kickstarter. I'll put a link in the description. You can follow it until it goes live on April 28th, and then sometime after that we'll probably do something on our end as well. So very exciting all the same. Watch this space.
Just want to jump in. It's worth following Sherwin and Steam Force on Twitter if you're interested, because there is stuff pertaining to the board game as well. Like if you backed RE2, you could potentially be getting some, shall we say, upgrades for it if you get RE3 as well. It's worth checking out.
Absolutely, yeah. Follow all that social media, because I don't know how much information they'll be dropping before the actual campaign starts as well. So it's best to have all that information before it goes live.
Okay, so our next bit of news, more pertaining to, shall we say, direct current events. Jill Valentine will be joining the cast of survivors in Resident Evil Resistance in the first free update for the game on April 17th. I believe is just over 10 days away?
Yes.
No, 9 days away.
Yeah, exciting. What do you think? She's gonna have a dodge that's gonna set her apart, I guess. She's gonna kind of play a bit like, obviously they're gonna have to slow her down a bit because Resistance is a bit more slower paced. But I assume she's gonna get a dodge. I have no guesses what her fever skill is gonna be, but it's definitely the first place to start. In terms of adding characters. So yeah, but I will wonder exactly how that would work. You could just unlock all doors.
I think it'll be like a cooldown thing. Like you've got the kick with Tyrone. It'll be, she can just like, done, doors open.
Sure.
But as for other skills, I honestly don't know. I mean, getting exploded and carrying on. That woman takes so much abuse in the main campaign. It's unreal. Unless it's like summon a grenade launcher, because I don't think there's a grenade launcher in the campaign, in the Resistance game proper, except for like a random pickup. And that weapon gets a lot of use in RE3.
Yeah, it's very possible.
A weapon, I would argue.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. James, have you played Resistance yet? How do you feel about Jill coming in?
I played with Steve and some of the first day spray crew really late in the evening, and I did enjoy it. It was super, super fun. I played Tyrone. I just punched and kicked things a lot. We were bat bros. I think the same thing with Jill. I think she's obviously going to get a dodge mechanic or something like that. Otherwise, I haven't really thought about it much, so I'm not really sure what else they'll add other than making her tanky, because, man, she could take a rocket.
Jordan, have you played Resistance at all? How do you feel about Jill being added?
I haven't. I thought I would deal with the main game first, because I know we obviously will be looking at Resistance a little bit later. But what I will say about the character inclusion, it's obviously it's a really great indication of what content is going to be coming down the line. I mean, you got 2 remakes now, and you got a wealth of new character designs for fan favorites and stuff. So you would assume that so long as the content stream is quite regular, that you're going to get a really cool roster at the end of this. So yeah, it's good stuff, and perfect to kind of come like so soon after the release of the game.
Yes, yeah, I do love when they strike when the iron is hot like that and be like, the game's out. 2 weeks later, basically, here's some updates to it. And you're right, like there's so many characters now that have models and stuff in the RE engine. We've been saying since the game was announced that it's prime for just continual updates like that. If it's successful, so let's hope that that's the case. And as you pointed out, we'll be talking about Resistance later on this month after the Jill update comes out. So we'll get into the nitty gritty of what exactly her abilities are then as well, I'm sure.
Okay, our last piece of news is pinch of salt, everybody, pinch of salt. Okay, Dusk Golem, notorious leaker, has revealed the first batch of potential information about the 2021 Resident Evil title, which is called something along the lines of Village, because they can put the Roman numeral for 8 in the word Village.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, he's been tweeting a lot over the last week about what exactly this next game is going to be. Expected to come Q1 2021. Again, like Steve said, grain of salt with this. It is all leaks and rumours and innuendo and all that. But it's Resident Evil 8. Or it wasn't originally intended to be Resident Evil 8. It was going to be Revelations 3. But the positive reception from ambassadors that playtest the game was so great that they've decided to do a Resident Evil 3 and take a side game and give it a main number title. So it looks like Resident Evil 8 is going to be coming next, potentially, if this is true. And a lot of that information that we got previously about it starring Ethan and Chris still seems to be on the cards. A witch, stalker enemy. It's a lot to dissect, but however much of it is true or not, we're not entirely sure yet. Expectation is for it to be revealed in the summer. Obviously, with the ongoing situation of the world, that might not be the case. Jordan, how do you feel about these Resident Evil 8 Village rumours?
Well, there's certainly a lot of details to go over. I was kind of surprised by just how much is out there. I don't know a great deal about Dusk Golem, so I don't know what exactly their track record is with regards to leaks. But obviously, if they've got some kind of reputation, it means that they've been right some of the time at least. I mean, the thing is, any kind of Resident Evil that's in development or anything that's in sort of early stages and details are coming out, is kind of the point where any kind of Resident Evil development thrives. There's lots of ideas that get, chucked up into the air. And by the time you actually get a release, it's usually typically more refined than that. Obviously, we've had it plenty of times where you can look at 0.5 games and they look drastically different than, what actually kind of comes out as the next game. This seems to be kind of maybe picking up from the details that I saw, some of the kind of like, more psychological sort of tones, but also, bits more supernatural as well, which is obviously something they looked at for the development of Resident Evil 4, and they went off obviously in a different direction there. I mean, obviously, yeah, taking it all with a pinch of salt, but I'm just surprised with how many details have come out. Really, I would hazard to guess that it's true, at least some of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because I would be annoyed, obviously, if so much came out and then almost none of it actually kind of made it to whatever Resident Evil 8 comes along. We know that there's going to be a Resident Evil 8 at some point. One thing that does maybe convince me that it's legitimate is the idea that it's spurred off from a Revelations 3 team, because I feel like Capcom is kind of in that stretch at the moment where games in the series that might be considered sort of almost supplementary sort of side games and stuff like that are kind of being kind of geared more towards the forefront. I think after Resident Evil 6 they decided to really kind of branch out and try and kind of like figure out what appeals to fans. I'd even call the remakes technically kind of spin-off titles, but when you play them, they are definitively core entries, and so that could well be what's happened with the development here.
For sure. Steve, anything stand out in particular for you in terms of these rumors?
Well, I mean, the whole hallucinations angle, right, and the fact that they mentioned that it was going to be a Revelations game. Me leads to believe that maybe there is some grain of truth, because I mean the whole fear aspect that they're trying to push. Fear was all Alex's thing, and she's the only villain of the Revelations universe that's kind of worth a damn. Not trying to knock whatever mop-haired guy and whatever his name was from Revelations 1, but so that's possible. But Dust Golem's also been a bit hit and miss lately. Maybe that's just me. It feels like this could be early information that they're feeding him to get everyone talking, to get feedback, if that makes sense.
Right. It's interesting.
I'm like, it'll be awesome if it's a fear-derived version, because we always get action stuff. I mean, even Remake 2's action, Remake 3's action. It'd be nice to have a bit of a slow-paced, slightly scarier game, because RE7, the fear was definitely more of a factor there. So that would be great. I want to see one thing, and that is a bluish, apparition-ish shaped thing with hooks for hands. And that's all I'll say on it otherwise.
James, how do you feel about all this chatter?
As usual with rumors, I'm super, super excited about them, but I always try and keep my expectation low. However, in the short little blurb we got, there was mention of a witch and quote weird aspects, which I love. I love pseudoscience when it's not taken too seriously, which is I think why I like Resident Evil so much. Right, but like witches and stuff, that's so cool. I expect to see, if this is true, expect to see hallucinations, rooms that weren't there before, maybe some kind of mastermind thing happening. Maybe they put so much into it and it was going to be a Revelations game. It was going to be a bit weird, which is why they've kind of said that it's divisive, like the way some people might love it, some people might hate it, just from what they're doing with it. But I think that's cool because it's a different direction again. But I hope it's a continuation from 7, like an actual direct continuation, because we thought this was going to be. That 7 was going to be a completely new arc, and although we've not got more information yet, I really do hope that it is, because I think Resident Evil needs that at the moment.
I think with the talk of it being an Ethan and Chris focused game, for one thing, that makes chances pretty high, obviously, but the hallucinations thing isn't particularly that wild when you think about it. Kind of spoilers for RE7 here. There's a lot of hallucinations in that game. So technically speaking, it does sound like it could lead on from some story threads in that, which would be definitely a wise move, especially for a numbered title. As Choji says in the live chat, and as you pointed out, there's been talk of it being divisive. Not from Capcom themselves, they've not said anything on the matter, of course, but Dust Golem said that it could be divisive for old school fans. So I wonder what exactly that means. Maybe he's referring to the sort of pseudo-supernatural elements. But again, these kind of things, they've cropped up before and then been kind of retroactively explained by, the effect that a virus or whatever can have on someone. So as long as there's some kind of pseudoscience, it'll be fine, right?
Yeah. I'm also completely down for werewolves. Okay, Capcom, I'm completely down for werewolves. Don't listen to these
transformation,
people.
isn't it? It's just a transformation that can dial back and forth. That's nothing. That's...
I mean, what are we just gonna throughout the entire series of? I haven't played the Revelations, the other spin-offs, but what are we gonna get? We're just gonna have giant blob monsters by the end of the game every single series. We need something different. Give me
one, everybody.
No, it's going to turn like God of War. It's actually going to be the giant blob monster is the next stage.
That would be different.
Isn't the big takeaway from all these rumours that we're going to have a quote-unquote evil Chris?
There is definitely talk that there's sort of like clashing between those characters or some sort of like dark past of Ethan that potentially involves Chris in some way.
We've had evil Chris apparently going to happen before and it never came through.
Yeah, so this sounds like an amalgamation of things that were in planning stages for other games and then just smooshed together.
So, so I need to get my writing book out, my pen, because I need to start fanficking this already, right? Because then I can actually, lay claim to the rights.
When you get it all right, like last time.
Yeah, exactly. And not be slow on the uptake this time. But I welcome Chris being a bad guy. I did kind of suspect at the end of I know a lot of people did. I'm not saying it's new, but at the end of RE7, I kind of suspected Chris would go that way. I think I said in our Let's Play, Steve.
Please allow me to slap my thigh and go, it probably is going to be revealed it actually isn't. I know they said it's definitely Chris, in recent years, but they can always just retcon that. Wesker was apparently dead in RE1. They retconned that in Code Veronica.
Right, for sure.
So, pinches of salt. Even if I still buy off of this stuff, to be honest.
Well, if it's coming Q1, we'll know, obviously, sort of probably latest by, autumn/fall kind of time of year. Probably be the latest. We'll start getting some announcements on this. So watch this space, I suppose. Okay, well, with that out of the way, let's roll on into the massive undertaking that is discussing the Resident Evil 3 remake. And now, reading the file Message from a Colleague from Resident Evil 3 2020 in character as Brad Vickers, John Burnett, who you can find on YouTube at the channel Kendo Gun Shop.
To Jill Valentine. Hey Hotshot, how you holding up? I still can't believe Iron suspended you. It's such bull. He ought to pin a medal on you for making it out of that hellhole back in July. Of course you're going to poke around and ask questions about it. I hope you're not mad at me for keeping my head down. Everything's been happening so fast. Stars was the pride of the Force. When the chief disbanded us out of nowhere, I thought for sure I was going to lose my job. Word has it you're planning to leave Raccoon City. I figured you wouldn't take the suspension lying down. Just promise to watch your back. Umbrella won't sit by while you try to dismantle their business. Take care, Jill. Brad Vickers, Stars Alpha Team. Now and forever. P.S. Had to slip this message to the pizza guy to avoid detection. Enjoy the extra large Mega Meat Supreme. It's on me and the guys.
Okay, it is here, the Resident Evil 3 remake. It was announced late last year. We've turned around for 5 minutes and it's out. We have played it. Now we can discuss it. There's a lot to dissect, so we're going to kind of try and go through this bit by bit. I guess the most logical place to start would be the gameplay. Where to even start? I mean, obviously, I've been thinking since the beginning that it's going to be much more of a punchy kind of affair, and that's been the general sentiment, that it's a very much a moving piece of media. There is, whereas Resident Evil 2 was classic to the Resident Evil 2, getting lost in the location, Resident Evil 3 OG and the remake are all about sprinting from one place to the next. We obviously got a taste of the gameplay in the beta with sort of like a little bit of a hub area. So we kind of got accustomed to what exactly the game was, but let's get into sort of like specific experiences with that. So Steve, why don't you start us off, talk about the gameplay. What did you like, what didn't you like, any expectations that it did or didn't live up to?
Well, okay, I think for me personally, RE3 is okay. The original RE3 is an okay game. I enjoy it well enough, but it's not something that I was clamoring for a remake for. So this one didn't have any high expectations from it. Mm-hmm. So in this particular case, I was more go with it. Let's see what Capcom do. And I appreciate that they tried to have a few hub areas, but they weren't. The only one that really is that much of a complex Resident Evil feeling hub is the one you actually get in the demo. Because you cross over that area like 6 or 7 times. But the gameplay itself is fine. This is going to sound really nitpicky, but the animations from RE2 that they obviously are reusing. To be honest, right. It's like an animated RE2 expansion, isn't it, in some way? Mm-hmm. But the zombie bites and stuff like that, they take like about 2 hours longer than they should because you're used to shoving a knife in them or something. They should have. Right. They could have sped them up or changed them a little because that really takes me out of it because it's like you're just waiting a good 2 seconds seeing this scary face before it takes a bite. You hold a button to like resist damage, but it doesn't do anything other than that. You can't like push them off faster or anything like that. That's kind of annoyed me. The dodge mechanic, amazing. When you know how to do it, it's perfect. It's a game breaker in some regards. It's essential for the hard difficulties. Perhaps the best shotgun in a Resident Evil game ever. I want to say this is a ridiculous like compliment, but hey, bear with me, right? I love me a Resident Evil shotgun. The Hydra in RE5, whack, brilliant. The one in this one, fully upgraded, can flatten a crowd of 6 zombies in a shot. That's OP. It's amazingly OP. I love that. The god complex the weapons give you, unless you're playing as Carlos and you're fighting a hunter.
Yeah, that.
But the actual there's something to be said about it's maybe streamlined too much, the gameplay. Mm-hmm. Like it's too easy to steamroll. Right,
we'll definitely get into that. That's definitely a big talking point. I've got on my notes that the range of weaponry was really cool. Obviously Remake 2 followed the RE2 classic somewhat by giving each character their own sort of set of weapons, whereas Jill just gets to run like rampant with a full gambit of everything. You mentioned the grenade launcher as well previously. Combining the mine thrower in with that, I thought was a brilliant stroke of genius. You are cutting a weapon, sort of, but it's not really anything that's going to be missed, and you're not really cutting it because you just kind of streamlining it perhaps in a good way in this segment. The Carlos segments for me, I found to be a very welcome change of pace. Like it does, where Jill is fully kitted out. With Carlos, sometimes you go back to just having a handgun and an assault rifle, and that's nice because it changes the pace and the mood up a little bit. James, what was your general feelings of the RE3 gameplay?
So straight from the off, it's not Remake 2. Mm-hmm. Like it is, even though Remake 2 was an action game, this is like playing an 80s movie in an action game. It's just very, and also it feels I know it sounds strange and it kind of makes sense because she's a STARS member, but it feels more regimented. Like I always know you put 4 bullets into the head of a zombie, it drops. It's
right,
down.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas in Remake 2, 1, 2, maybe 3 if you get lucky, 4, 5 if you get really unlucky, right? It was a little bit funky when it comes to that. But yeah, gameplay, the dodge I only really got used to in my second playthrough, and man, it makes you feel really cool every time you do it. It makes you feel so cool. I mean, I managed to uppercut Bloodborne Nemesis, as I call him, with my knife. Right, because of the dodge. Right, I was like, I can't die now. I can't die because I know how to do this. This is great. It was, and the weaponry is awesome, and you feel powerful. And I feel like you should feel powerful because you're Jill, mother effing Valentine, right? So you've got STARS expertise, and you know how to use these weapons. But I do feel as well that there are some things that are just forgotten and aren't really useful towards the end in terms of the gameplay. Like, hardly ever used my pistol towards the end of the game. I feel like I probably should just have been my pistol. Actually, now I think about it, because at the end, actually 3/4 of the way to the end, I don't use it at all on any of the zombies. But yeah, I think we've already covered it. But a lot of reskins, a lot of reuse. I see the same. I can't remember who the actor is, but there's a particular police officer zombie that I see all the time, and I want to kill him most. Right, because I just see him all the time. He's always there.
Again.
The world's most recognizable zombie cop.
What else did I talk about? I didn't use not as much in the demo as I did in the demo. I didn't use the kind of this on the keyboard, it's spacebar, but the kind of the positioning of Jill, where you can dodge to the left, right, back. Right. I didn't use it as much as I did in the demo because I always felt like I had enough space to do what I could, which was pretty cool. I really like the gameplay was fun and it was easy to master. Crits never happened. They never they were.
You've got to focus your aim, James.
I was focusing my goddamn aim, right? You could count on one of my hands how many times I crit on my first playthrough, right, with focus shots. In Remake 2, I thought it was bad, but in Remake 3, she's freaking STARS. She should be critting more.
Nemesis
right?
coming up like, "What's wrong, bro? You're not getting crits, bro."
And the thing is I think I was getting just as many crits just by hip firing them than I was not technically hip fire, but just quick aiming than I was from focus aiming. So I would love to know what those stats are, how they work all that.
Fair enough.
There's an air of salt on the podcast.
No, yes, I have an entire container of salt that I just want to pour all over this game. I do love it, but they're just some little things that we'll go over.
That's fair enough. In terms of that action style, you were talking about being like an action movie. For me, that's sort of what I expected. So for me, I enjoyed that part quite a lot. In fact, I always thought it was really interesting that people say that RE3 is quite open-ended, sort of. I was going to say quasi-open world, but I'm sure some people will be brave enough to call it that. I 100% disagree. There's a bit at the beginning maybe where you can get some items in a few different orders. Other than that, it's manically moving from set piece to set piece, especially after this sort of when you get on the tram and get to the clock tower. It's not as open-ended as people seem to claim that it is. And Remake 3 did exactly the same kind of style of sort of the city streets, and then after a certain point, you're just moving from place to place. So I was perfectly happy because that's what I expected. The beginning, though, kind of threw me through a loop. So Jordan, I'd like to know what your reaction was to the beginning of the gameplay, since you predicted a long time ago that it would be first-person RE3, and how did the game start up?
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I don't know which episode it was. Let's say maybe like in the first 2 or 3 episodes or so.
Yeah.
Everybody go back. Go listen to the full shows. Make sure to check that. Right? Maybe the first 10. Heck, just bring yourself up to date. Anyway, so I said I thought it was going to be first person because I thought, well, they may not necessarily go the same way with Remake 3 as they would with Remake 2. They might want to kind of branch back into Resident Evil 7, and obviously with those rumors about Village, there's clearly some interest from Capcom's side as well to still go for that. But then I started the game, and what do you know? It's in first person. I'm walking around, Jill Valentine in her apartment, walking around, and I was so happy. I was so happy. I turned it off. I didn't play the rest of the game. Being right couldn't top, frankly. So I don't really know the rest of the gameplay. No, to get into my serious thoughts about the gameplay, I will say, in case I hadn't mentioned before on the podcast, double check just to be sure. But I did not play the original Resident Evil 3 in really any kind of fashion. I might have watched other people play it a little bit, but my experience with Resident Evil 3 is just absolutely detached. Honestly, the closest I got was the Umbrella Chronicles. Sorry, Umbrella Chronicles? Yeah. Umbrella Chronicles.
No.
So there you go. Like it's very distant, but I know exactly, obviously, what it is, and I also know kind of like how you're meant to kind of approach it. And despite that, I just want to say that as a disclosure, that my experience entirely comes from how I approach this following Remake 2. So I see it as a follow-up to Remake 2, not a remake to Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. And in that respect, it is actually, it's a bit of a compliment to Remake 2, because if you're coming off the back of that, you've seen those latter stages of Remake 2, which are, largely action focused, or once you're in the final stretch, once you're basically kind of given carte blanche to go crazy, when it comes to Tyrant, you kind of have that bombastic ending. And so this game kind of being a little bit more free and easy with regards to how much you should use your ammo or how much you should conserve your ammo, and just generally kind of like blitzing through areas, not having to worry so much about puzzles, I thought was kind of refreshing, because obviously that was the notion in the original game anyway. But if you're playing these one after another, you're not necessarily going to want to roll right back to somebody who is, a rookie cop on their first day. This is Jill Valentine, who has already went through an ordeal herself. She's already survived, something that was quite extreme. So it makes sense that you, as the player, connect with Jill as somebody who's already went through this, and kind of knows how to deal with the situation. And also, it obviously helps that Raccoon City. There's not too many crossovers across the game, but when they happen, you have a better inclination with navigating it. I'd be curious to know exactly how this whole experience is received by people who didn't play Remake 2, although I don't think there's that many that would do that. I suppose maybe Resident Evil 3 diehards who only played that game might check it out. But yeah, I didn't mind the gameplay. The only thing I would say was that I think it could have gone further, because it's still based in Remake 2's sort of game engine and sort of design spec, and as such, I think it could have been maybe a little more forgiving when it comes to taking down zombies, but maybe a little less forgiving in just how many zombies there were, with just how fast you can kind of move, and obviously the weapons that you get at your disposal throughout the game. It kind of felt like you could have done a bit more man management, and let the environment kind of envelop you at points. And as James pointed out, there's a lot of space. The game gives you a lot of space, so you never necessarily feel that you are getting stuck or overwhelmed unless you're really being careless. The sidestep's great. I didn't use it too much, but it feels really good. And if you do it back and forth, you kind of look like Elena from Street Fighter doing her standing pose. But yeah, I'll be honest. I had, I felt a little bit of sort of reservation when I kind of like a lot of people saying it was short. We'll get into that, but I think for what it is, it's a lovely brisk game. Some great set pieces. Bosses are maybe a little bit weaker, but it was the same in Remake 2. But as the gameplay goes, I think it gels well enough.
Yes, it works as a companion, like you say. It's similar but different. Touching on bosses that you mentioned there, I thought they were definitely better than Remake 2's. Not fantastic, but infinitely better than some of the stuff that we had to do over and over again in Resident Evil 2. In general, I found this game to be more inviting in a replay sense, and perhaps that's the punchy pace and stuff like that, rather than obviously RE2's style, which is geared towards running around in circles and going back and forth, which is something I love in its own right. but I found this more inviting replayability wise, especially because there are some points that I struggled difficulty wise. Even on standards, it got me a couple of times. So, playing through it on hardcore as I did last night, people saw in the server me like screaming for help. And there are, 2 more difficulty settings after that. So that's, whilst, some people could argue that it's sort of like falsely padding itself with extra difficulties. And at the very least, some of those later difficulties, apparently, I haven't got to play Nightmare yet. Steve, you could perhaps touch on this. Mix up the gameplay a little bit by kind of rearranging it, almost like a director's cut, with items and stuff, or...
Yeah, it's similar, but not quite. I mean, your key items are still in the same places, but like weapons, well, specifically, right at the start, when Jill's like leaving the train, subway train, whatever.
Yeah.
There's a side pack and a magnum where there were 2 gunpowders.
Wow.
That should give you an idea what you're coming up against.
Oh, that's
and the first area where the first real zombie you have to go up against is one of them. Then immediately around the corner, there's a squad of 5. The population of Raccoon City is like doubled.
Right, interesting.
Anywhere a zombie can fall off from above, it's going to. Which sounds silly, but they will fall off of rooftops. They will like appear from nowhere. There's pale heads knocking around. There's pale heads with parasites knocking around.
Wow.
Slight spoiler: Brad does not die in his initial encounter with you. Lickers. There are more lickers in the game. Spoilers: there's lickers in the game. We were going to get there eventually. They remix a lot.
Nice,
item
cool.
placements and enemy placements.
Yeah.
I would argue that Nightmare is a remix of Hardcore's like difficulty with the new items, and then Inferno is where the game takes the mick. Except with the exclusion here is the star of the show, whose speed has been increased dramatically. He's way faster.
Right. Okay. Interesting. I'm interested to try that out. Even though I've been playing it a lot recently, I took a bit of a break. Even though I've been playing it a lot recently, I'm interested to try out these other 2 difficulties to see if it sort of maybe alleviate some of the problems, as Jordan said there, that I hadn't really thought about. Maybe it needs to be a bit more overpopulated, perhaps. That's a thing in later difficulties. Speaking of the little break, though, it just playing through the game twice and then playing Resistance for a couple of days and then coming back. Man, and we'll get to Resistance on another day. This game is so unbelievably fluid. When you take some time away to play something else and come back, just the way that the game feel in general is so nice. Of all the nitpicks that we have and that are coming with other parts of this game, the actual moving a character around this space I found incredibly fun. It's just a fun ride, basically, just to sum it up. So let's get to the story a little bit, and we are going to get fully into spoilers from here on out. Touched on them, but this is going to be a spoiler cast, definitely. So if for some reason you haven't played the game for yourself or watched through it or whatever you choose to do, maybe come back later. So let's get through the story, starting with the first person bit, as previously mentioned, which I thought was really cool. Then the first sort of act, if you like, kind of threw me through a loop, to be honest. Not a fan of the can I play the game segments that appear in this, where you're running away from Nemesis in the apartment building as well. Especially if you're playing it on a multiple, second or third or fourth playthrough, and you're skipping the cutscenes, you'll suddenly get to a bit where you just push forward for a little while, then another cutscene, and there's a few of those throughout the game, starting off with the beginning where you're just constantly skipping cutscenes on multiple replays. And then after that, we just had all these nostalgic moments from the original just thrown at us. You've got the appearance of Brad, you go through Bar Jack, there's Dario, oh he's gone, parking garage, boom, everything over before the game even really kicks off. After that, things got better for me, but let's stay with the beginning. James, how did you feel about this crazy rush that was the beginning of the story?
I liked it. The very beginning, I mean, I showcased it yesterday, actually. The bit where it's a top over camera and you're running through the corridor away from Nemesis and the corridor is on fire. I mean, most of that, everything was on fire, but yeah. If you just wait in that corridor, he doesn't chase you. There is.
He does. He kills you. He has a kill move if you're in that. You're talking about he's got the creeps hands.
He's like he's got like some kind of concrete slab in his hand.
He crushes you. If you just, I know because I kind of thought, what happens?
Oh right, so
he just upends the thing and he flattens you.
What is that like after 4 or 5 seconds? Because I was standing there for like 2.5 seconds.
Something like that. You just stand there in front of him like a complete wally. You get crushed.
Well, he also stands there. It's like he's go on, be free, little stars, be free. It's just like do your best. But yeah, like I did feel like that first. I want to say 4 or 5 minutes is pretty scripted. You don't really have any sense of danger. So I was trying to get into it into an immersive sense, a story sense, which I could do. I didn't feel like I needed to control that bit. I felt like they could have just done a cutscene, that entire thing, like you said, just an entire cutscene. Then you could have skipped it, right? And because there's no way you will die at that point. And then getting into the what would you call it? The demo section. What would that be?
It's called Downtown.
Downtown, right? Yeah. Getting into Downtown. Really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that. Even though I only played it once, when I played it again, I felt like I knew where almost everything was, and that's coming from me, who's like really bad with that kind of stuff. I felt like I knew where I was going, what my plan was. Even though when you look at the maps, it looks a bit confusing to a new mind. It's pretty well laid out, and I like it. There's always several places you can go. I remember on my second, it was Steve's recommendation. I just rushed to the power station to get the lockpick. So I rushed to it, forgot I just skipped all the cutscenes, got the lockpick, and then just went back into the area and looted the entire place like the good loot donkey it was.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think everyone who played that first section would have got the pliers. Right, I'm going to go clear all the areas with the padlocks with pliers. Then you get the lockpick and do a second lap. Might as well just do one lap when you know what you're doing.
Yeah,
if you want to do a lap at all.
Yeah, makes complete sense. And that's cool. That's cool they allow you to do that. I didn't even realize you could do that. I thought there were certain story elements you had to go through, but no, you can skip straight through to that power station section. Would you say the power station section is beginning of the game? Kind of is, right?
I mean, technically you could, yeah. Downtown's a bit of a weird one because it crops up briefly several times, and yeah, it depends on how you want to treat it and what order you want to do things in.
Yeah. Again, the whole scripted thing kind of comes in again around Downtown. There's a lot of scripted stuff that didn't really need to happen. There's a lot of scripted zombies there, but again, I'll talk about these scripted zombies more later on because they do my head in. They're just, I listen, right? I stabbed every single goddamn zombie in that game that was on the ground, right? And they just come back again, and I'm like, no, you're meant to be dead. You're meant to stay dead. Like, I'm stabbing you in the head, right? And Steve's in the chat. It's like, yeah, you just stab them until they stop moving, obviously, because that's typically how you do it. And like, I'm like sitting there stabbing it 5-6 times, and then it just comes back later anyway. I'm like, you have no head left. You shouldn't be doing this. Yeah, but I enjoyed that first section. I enjoyed that how fluid it was and how flowing it was. I just wish they would just cut that whole chase scene out, just turn it into a cutscene.
Mm-hmm. Steve, how did you feel about sort of, let's say from the beginning up to the power station?
I like, when I first played it, obviously I'd already seen Sunny stream, so I was going to take a time to just savor the moment. And I spent the first 10 minutes just, wandering around Jill's room, all the stuff. Girl needs to clean her cooker. Well, not anymore now. The city's been blown up, but good state. And she must love her fast food. Like, she's got like 1 million fast food pamphlets around her fridge. Goodness me, woman!
I'm feeling really attacked right now. Clean your oven. Don't eat so much fast food.
She's as bad as me.
I also have a Raccoon City chart up on the wall with all these screens connecting things.
Yeah,
it's got a Moon's Donut menu. What? Anyway. No, yeah. I spent the opening bit was mostly me looking around the room, but the chase sequence itself, I thought honestly it was fine. I agree, it could have been a cutscene. It's nice to now know that Jill got exploded out of her house for a reason. Because in the original RE3, she gets exploded out of a building. Wham! There you go. You've headbutted a car. You're fine. You know, that is nice for the added context. Obviously, we don't know if Nemesis was chasing us before in the original, but yeah, I liked the old like set piece, the set piece-ness to it. But I wish there was more to do than just press forward and maybe shoot a single zombie and then press forward again.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the ending to that sequence is awesome. The whole like car smash on the rooftop, followed by the rocket launch to Nemesis. I love that. I never skip that scene. I love it every time.
Mm-hmm.
But it does get monotonous on replays, especially like Si said. You skip, you press forward. You skip, you press forward. You skip. That's not good game design.
Unfortunately, yeah.
It kind of flies in the face of what Remake 2 achieved, where you have the whole sort of gas station section, which kind of teaches you about the basics of the game, deals you with your first enemy, and then overwhelms you, with additional enemies. And there's very little sort of interruption to that whole period. I couldn't tell you anything that I was necessarily taught from the Resident Evil 3 remake opening, apart from you got to keep running or you're going to get killed. But you're not even being killed by the character; you're being killed by the cutscene practically. So yeah, they could have condensed it. I mean, with regards to the story and the beginning of the story, wasn't a fan of the live action opening.
Command and Conquer, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, if you kind of just set it on paper, live action opening for a Resident Evil game, a lot of people will be very happy because they know what that looks like typically, and it's just not the case here. It's a bit kind of bland, and I felt like there was an opportunity missed to maybe. I get it. Most people know the story of Resident Evil, and they know Jill Valentine's character and all that. But kind of felt like they missed an opportunity to maybe kind of tie it in with both the events of Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2. Because it doesn't necessarily... It's not like it's treating it like... for people who may have only played Remake 2 going on to this game, it's not treating it like Jill Valentine is a brand new character that you can start to learn about. It is very clearly... this is a character you should know by now. And that's fine, but for people who are necessarily kind of coming in, who haven't played Remake 1, or it's just been kind of a case of a long time, it would just have been nice to kind of have that connection. It's just like, by the way, this is Jill. She's been through a lot herself.
Yeah.
And she's planning to get out of there. So that was kind of a shame because I had no connection with sort of the live action intro at all. It's like, I don't know, it could have just been done 1,000 ways better. The story and the way it's handled obviously gets much better throughout the game. But yeah, that opening 20 minutes or so, it's just a lot of bits which are clumsy, I would say.
Mm-hmm. I actually want to piggyback off that slightly before we move on, is that I think they almost did sort of like a wise thing. So the Resident Evil 3 opening is perhaps the greatest opening in series history. The cutscene of the last stand of the RPD against the wave of the undead. It's used in so many videos since Capcom, or obviously otherwise YouTube, and we love using that video. It's a great cinematic, even 20 years later. I think it was wise of them to perhaps try and not redo it, because there's a hell of a legacy to live up to. I just agree that what they decided to do instead fell very flat for me. It was very sort of generic almost, and it would have been nice to have a proper setup to the story so far. Or that, in a way, it would almost be like a nod to the previous games that often did start, with a bizarre spree of murders, something like that would have been nice. But I thought it was quite a cold opening. So let's talk about the story in general, I guess. I'm not really sure where to start with this one. It's mostly the same. The story of Resident Evil 3 is pretty basic. Jill tries to get out of the city, encounters the UVCS, Nemesis chases them, and they need to get out before the city explodes after the government decide that it's probably a good idea to wipe it off the map. That's basically all the essentials you need to hit. Generally, I thought it was handled well. We'll talk about cut content and stuff like that in a little bit. But in terms of a story, it was okay. The vaccine part at the end felt a little bit needless, but I think that's probably leading into something in the future. And I think it was inserted because the story in RE3 is kind of basic. But overall, the story was fine. It wasn't super engaging from a storyline perspective, but it was carried very well by the characters for me. Jordan, how did you feel about the overall plot?
Well, it was very enjoyable to watch. There's plenty of cutscenes, and I'm sure it's already been a case that people have uploaded a game movie on YouTube that kind of pretty much brings all of the story together. I mean, to be honest, when I was playing it, I couldn't help but feel, especially during some of the fantastic cutscenes, some great polish, just how good these games, in terms of sort of a cinematic presentation, are outpacing the CGI movies. Now, I know that's not a massive achievement, because the CGI movies were, kind of a bit meh. But still, it was the fact that it could actually stand on its own as this competent storytelling, and it's weird because this series started with a game that clearly didn't have the budget to kind of really put anything forward that was overly serious or substantial when it comes to cinematic, and yet this game, it was great to kind of be engrossed in that story. Like I say, it's not the most complex story, and as far as sort of like the story beats go, I mean, it's as simple as kind of the way that it changes from Jill to Carlos to Jill to Carlos to Jill. But I really liked it. I honestly, I was so happy, because there's been a lot of sort of hammy cutscenes in Resident Evil games, and they're lovable, but I kind of felt like, wow, this feels like watching an actual movie. Like the characters are sort of well rounded, and the acting's great. I mean, obviously, my experience with Nemesis is sort of non-existent, so I don't necessarily know too much differences in the stories. But again, it complements perfectly fine with Remake 2's story, which was obviously a little bit more engaged with sort of unraveling the kind of conspiracy. This is just kind of like straight up, let's get the hell out of here by any means necessary.
Yeah. Which again sort of matches the pace of the gameplay. So it's nice to have the story and the gameplay coincide like that. Steve, how did you feel about the story? Please don't rag on me too hard for forgetting the fact that Jill needs to get infected in that very brief rundown of story elements. How did you feel about the story?
I generally, to echo what Jordan said, this felt like a lot of times I felt like I was playing the best Terminator movie ever made. Okay, it's not Terminator 2, but it genuinely feels like this could have been superior to any of the CGI films, and that's just watching the cutscene.
Yeah.
The story itself, it's fairly straightforward. Got to get the hell out of Dodge. But the actual way that Nemesis is portrayed, the chase, so to speak, every time the pace changes, it's left on a cliffhanger. For example, the last one's kind of semi-unresolved, because Carlos goes, I've got to go do a thing. And then with Jill, we don't have any idea what Carlos is doing. Oh, I'm here at the end. Hi.
Yeah.
But the actual stuff, I can't complain it. I can't knock it. The actual story itself seems fine. Just fine. Even the additions they've added. I know a lot of people are upset about subtractions. I'm sure we're going to get into that in a bit. But for example, we've now got a reason why the vaccine is a vaccine. It's now Umbrella developed, as opposed to just some dude in a hospital. This Dr. Bard is a complete tool, but is also now a part of the law. Every single character is well done. If anyone turns around and tells me this character in RE3 was done a disservice, you can Tyrell's an actual character.
Yeah.
The only one who I'd argue is probably a little bit shortchanged is probably Murphy, but then again, I can't remember much of what happened to him. The first one, other than he got shot by the Carlos.
He almost gets more in this game just because he gets that file that explains sort of the history of UBS, CS sort of history very well. But you're right, a little bit more time with that character would have been nice, but at the same time,
every character in the game has had even the characters and a lot of people are going to be salty about Kendo and Mark, rightfully so. There were teased in the trailers, but in the original RE3, Marvin was unconscious. And in the original RE3, I don't think Kendo was in it. If
No.
I remember right, he was busy in his shop, just like going, "This window looks a bit breakable." So it's nice they were there at all to link it to RE2, Remake 2. I really, as far, sorry, I feel like I'm repeating point after it's, but the actual story elements of RE3, I think there's obviously room for improvement, but they are fine as they are, and the portrayals of the characters are bang on. Like this is probably my favorite version of Jill and Carlos.
Nice.
Maybe second place on Jill. I'm not sure, but she's up there. Like Nikki Lee Thompson.
Yes. Yeah.
Did a bang up job.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll get a little bit into characters in a moment. But James, how do you feel about the sort of story as it rounded out?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to be doing a lot of repeating, really. So we're going to go, but yeah, it's a very simple story, and not a lot has changed. And I kind of like that in a way because it means, well, I kind of like it and I don't because it means they haven't really taken any risks. But at the same time, it's like they know their fan base, so they can't really take risks.
Right.
So it's like, well, not with RE3, it's one of the first trilogy, the first 3 games, so they can't really. But I did notice at the end. I'm not sure the significance of the scene, but is it Jill that takes the busted vaccine canister off a desk? Like, so I'm not sure the significance of that.
Right. So here's an interesting thing. Right. Okay. So all the characters, major characters in Resident Evil really are kind of color-coded, maybe with the exception of Leon. Chris always wears green, Jill always wears blue, Claire always wears red in some fashion. One particular character always wears green. One female character always wears green. And getting back to the Dusk Golem talk, and we were doing the deciphering on Discord. Obviously, we were going through the images that he'd been tweeting that week about a month ago. And James, you yourself did the detective work and made them as more visibly, decipherable as possible because they were, all photoshopped and stuff. And we correctly deciphered a picture of Rebecca, and things have changed. So there was a plan for a Rebecca appearance at some point, according to Dusk Golem, in one of these upcoming games. So I wonder if this is going to be leading into a future game because it's, I don't know, that's a theory. It's a theory. But I don't know why. It's a side theory. I just don't know why they would.
I don't have to say anything, do I?
I'm just glad you're the one that brought it up.
Yeah, no, I seen it and I was like, this is weird. But at the same time, I think when I completed it was like 1 a.m. in the morning.
Right. I don't want to get.
I didn't really.
Crazy into like speculative theory, but if you're going to give a character the vaccine dial that did have the T-virus antidote in it, you probably want to give it to someone with virology know-how, some kind of biological expert that maybe be able to scrape something off of it and do something with it. So to me, it seems pretty clear that's where they're going, or at least that's their intention. They could always change it later because it's vague enough, right? Who says that Jill doesn't have a green strappy top? It could be anyone.
I love that idea.
We should stick with these thoughts for now, shouldn't we, gentlemen?
but Rebecca Chambers can do anything.
I do love that idea of color coding, though. I mean, I never thought of that. Although during my playthrough, because you can change like the reticle and the dot sight, and I immediately changed it to blue because I'm playing as Jill. So
there you go, then. See,
yeah. Now that's interesting because I mean you don't necessarily notice it, but your brain did, and I do now notice it. That could be a really interesting lead. I mean, obviously we might not see anything come of that for a few years, but I like the idea of a possibility, a theory that these remakes could actually then lead into brand new games.
Now, here's the thing, right? Here we go. I'm gonna go and attack this one now while we're here. So, Resident Evil 3 Remake. Capcom have said that these remakes and the original games all take place at once. And if there is, and they said in a podcast at one point, that if at any point something doesn't coincide with another and there's some kind of contradiction, go with the original game. In that case, Resident Evil 3 Remake, whilst apparently it exists in line with Resident Evil 3, it's non-canon. It cannot exist at all. It changes so much that it cannot exist. Ergo, worries now that they're going to build off these games into new games. For me, this game is, if Capcom's word on it is that all these games exist in the same timeline and just pick and choose what you like, but also they say, you know, the original games take precedence, you kind of can't do that when it changes so much. With the exception of, you know, a few files that, you know, build up the gammas and stuff like that. There is so much change here that they need to come out and be more specific with it. Whether that specific is, okay, we're replacing the original timeline and annoy many long-term fans, particularly those that have written, you know, 6,000 pages worth of timeline. Shout out to the Batman. Or, you know, they just need to put it in stone that this is another timeline and we have a remake universe, and that's probably the correct way to handle it. And that's the way that I've always thought about it, and that's the way I've gone into this game thinking about it. And any of the changes that they've made I've been totally fine with, because after Remake 2, I just kind of felt like, well, okay, we're in a separate universe. That's the way I'm looking at it. Whether or not Capcom have told me that's what it is, that's the way
it might
that I
sound
feel
petulant. It might sound petulant, but I think that's the best way to go. Like, even if Capcom say, no, they're the same universe. No, Capcom, you've got Transformers animated.
Right. There's no problem. I don't see any reason not to do that. There's no bad, you know, juju that comes with that. I think it's probably a good thing. It means you can do more. Yeah. If you decide that this game replaces the original Resident Evil 3, then, well, okay, say goodbye to Outbreak 1 and 2 completely. They no longer happen at all. A bunch of the comics, probably Resident Evil 2 as well. Obviously this is probably a debate for another podcast that, you know, gets really in depth with these things, but for where I stand, it's a tricky one.
We need a split timeline.
Yes.
When Nemesis was defeated, Carlos played the Ocarina of Time and sent Jill back to her childhood.
Oh no!
But I love, like, as again, this is my second mention of it, and it's a subject that I know quite a lot about, and that's the Alien universe, where they have so many what ifs, like, out in the expanded universe, and it is what's the word? It has rejuvenated the universe for me. It's made it even better. So if you get that mindset, you can really enjoy a franchise even more if you just accept that this is the way it is. It's fiction, and don't where people, some people, you know, they forget that it's fiction, you know, and you're meant to enjoy the aspects of this fiction like the best way you can. And if this is the best way you can enjoy it, then you're not wrong for enjoying it. You know?
I think it's the way to go, because as I've mentioned before, coming into Remake 2, I was very worried about how they were going to handle it and what the potential quote-unquote damage it could do. But, you know, coming up with the split timeline idea, like you say, it's rejuvenation rather than potentially turning people away. Because I would be very hesitant about the future of, you know, their choices now to sort of replace games completely and take games out of the story in favour of these. And maybe that's not the right way to look at it. And I know there's a bunch of different viewpoints on this, so I don't want to stay with it too long. But we're in a strange state of flux. Anything could happen, to be honest, at this point.
I mean, can't you take the unreliable narrator angle a bit? Like, Umbrella Chronicles can be seen as an unreliable narration by Wesker because he completely retcons Barry out, right? See, there's the same kind of thing for the remakes. It's like someone else's faulty retelling or someone telling the truth, whereas the original was not the truth.
I think we mentioned in the Sherry episode you could do that with Remake 2. I just don't think that's possible with this game.
I mean, there's so many jigsaw pieces, but some of them can fit in the same slot and overwrite the others. It's impossible to make it all fit.
Yeah, it's obviously the Nathaniel Bard thing is one of the big things where it's, you know, I actually quite like as you mentioned, you know, the reason that Umbrella came up with the cure themselves, that makes sense rather than random blokes in a hospital. If you do remove that, then it makes some big changes and stuff like that. But
Goddamn Nathaniel Bard.
Goddamn Nathaniel Bard. So let's move away from that, I think.
Can I say some more things on story?
Oh, sure, please do. I cut you off.
Yeah. So because this is I love voice acting and acting in general and storyboarding. Really, really enjoyed the voice acting as usual. It really like if the game so I always kind of look at it this way. Say if a game was just run by dialogue boxes, kind of like old Final Fantasy VII was.
Yeah.
Right. And or the old RE, and the games don't work so well, especially nowadays. If you do that, if the gameplay is a little bit lacking or something's a little bit lacking, the voice direction and everything was great. Jill, really, really enjoyed her when I didn't really give a hoot about like Jill at all prior to this. Like I've said this numerous times. I know it's weird, but I felt like she didn't really have the charisma that I connected with. Not typically in a game, but in this game, I did. And like in Resident Evil 5 as well, where she gets the heart bug ripped out of her, she gets a little bit more personality again. And that's when I first realized that, oh, this character has a little bit something. And then in Remake 3, I actually see that personality. Also, I get the names mixed up, so I really apologize if I did. But Nikolai, bad guy Nikolai, right? Okay, that's how I'm going to remember it from now on, bad guy Nikolai. So all the way through my playthrough of that game, I was just looking at that gorgeous man. He is so good. He's such a good bad guy. I love him.
Yeah, I've got to jump in. He is probably the best looking character. Not like just in general, like the mocap looked really good. Very expressive. They're all characters were, but yeah, he in particular, considering he needs to be a bit of a sort of a side end, adversary, worked really well. Nice and sort of punchable as a character. Damn you!
They gave
showing
him
up every time.
Right,
they gave him stone-faced cold killer Nikolai is the most expressionist.
Yeah. They gave him some like real slime though, didn't he? Like laughing at his own jokes and stuff.
Not after me.
Yeah, where he's like waving behind the window
sniveling
in the train,
And then in contrast, Mikhail is so good as a good character. Like he's so good, and he gets that hero like kind of send off by calling the nemesis a bird. Like I don't know where
off my train.
I don't know. Like when he said that, I was like, that makes no sense, but I love it. I love you.
I know. I laughed, but immediately was like, yeah, okay. And it gets better, obviously, because in the later fight, Jill can also call Nemesis a bird, which I thought was lovely. I thought it was a great little through line to show the impact that Mikhail had on her.
I think as far as additions to the game, the course language in both Remake 2 and Remake 3 is a very welcome addition. It adds to the expression of the characters so much, and it especially created a wider appeal for me for Jill when I was playing as her. The amount of times that she swears and the way that she swears is very, very colorful and creative, and it was very enjoyable. Like she swears at all the right times. It's kind of like, let's take this sucker down. It's great. It's just weird to think about because you don't see. Maybe you do see swearing a lot in Japanese developed games, but I feel like it's not typical and it's not always localized to add a lot of swearing, if you know what I mean. So whenever a Japanese developed game in particular, where I've seen characters for years never swear, all of a sudden drop an F-bomb. I don't know. There's something satisfying about it.
It's a little bit naughty.
So I generally agree with all the points about the characters. Like Mikhail has such a great warmness that plays off of Nikolai's awful. And if we're talking about the sort of like the what if scenarios, I'd love to see something more of those characters, potentially where they clash, because they have that moment when Mikhail's very suspicious of Nikolai and he kind of figures out there's something up before it's, obviously way too late. But in terms of Jill and her expressiveness as well, I particularly liked her, and sort of like you can feel sort of like a genuine fondness growing between her and Carlos. They didn't push it too far or anything. He sort of comes onto her a little bit at the beginning. But he's quite professional, and there's a little bit of flirting. I just loved it. I thought that the sort of interaction between those characters was great, and the mocap and the facial capture did wonders, especially for Jill, between those two characters.
In the most Terminator, reminiscent of a Resident Evil game, you got like Ellen Ripley and Kyle Reese essentially being best mates.
Yeah, it's a sci-fi wet dream.
Yeah, you can't go wrong, can you? I mean, even the Nemesis, I would argue, is sort of a character now. Like, I see a cruel sadism in the way he just me. I just want to shout out, I mean, we all have favourite Jill one-liners by now, right?
Yes.
Have we got a pivotal yet? Have we got like a number one? Can't even swim for me. It's got to be.
The can't even swim is my favourite.
You can tell she just had enough of Nemesis. Johnny.
So, I think she says "suck it down" during one of the boss fights. I think.
Yeah.
I think she sticks a weapon like right in the throat or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. God, I don't know.
I love it.
I said it in the chat, but I also, when it's just before the Mikhail bird moment, but
nobody bleeps in this episode.
Yeah, thanks.
sorry. But yeah, when Carlos, when she realizes what's happening, like she's going to have to leave and Carlos is going to have to stay behind, and he says, "Don't worry, I won't leave you in a Carlos-less world."
Yes.
Right? And then she turns around to him and says, "The sexiest okay I've ever heard." Right? She's just like super sassy. She's like, "Okay." Right? Walks in. I'm like, "Okay, yeah, you just melted my heart."
Yeah, I thought that was a particularly great moment. That's the one that I was picturing in my head when I was talking about it as well. Definitely.
It's excellent chemistry between the two.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. Yeah.
Obviously, the actors did a great job. Because I think it sometimes can. Obviously, I don't know exactly how involved they are as far as sort of like whether it's voice acting, whether it's full sort of mocap suits or anything like that, because it can vary between different studios and stuff. But no, it can be quite difficult. And I would say there's a lot of photorealistic games that use motion capture these days. Not all of them hit the mark. The mark that you kind of want to hit is what Naughty Dog do with a lot of their games. And it absolutely is up there. These two remakes have really kind of hit that stride of making characters that are so expressive that you relate to them proper. They're not just an avatar. They are somebody that's going through this. And yeah, the acting all around is just great.
It's wonderful that you can see a kind of through line, can't you? And we talked about this before, from the beginning of the RE engine till now. The 3 Resident Evil entries, at least, because I haven't played DMC5 or anything else released on the engine, if there is anything else. But you can see with great rate how improved the facial capture and stuff is. RE7 looks a little bit awkward now compared to RE2, and RE3 again is just another level after that. We're talking about great lines as well. Talking about some other characters. A very simple line that now will live in infamy. Sorry!
Oh, Brad!
What a moment. Brad given the Bob treatment. I love that. Again, like I'm talking about a little bit earlier about the canon debate. But what a fantastic way to wrap up Brad and Marvin. We got the Brad zombie eventually in the remake universe, if that's how we're treating it, and we got our answer to how Marvin got,
do not hesitate.
Wounded. Right? Exactly. And it feeds back into that game. Even if it's someone do not hesitate.
It really caught me off guard, that line. It's a really great moment.
It's so well done.
And obviously sort of Marvin's reaction to it as well. It's just kind of wait, hold on a second.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, bless his heart.
It's a wonderful it's a wonderful zombie film or show trope as well. That kind of that disarming somebody, who doesn't quite understand that somebody's lost, and how it can kind of undercut the efforts to try and survive. Really good.
Mm. What do we think then, gang? Do we think Brad was actually apologising, or was he just kind of parroting what Marvin was saying?
I think it was basically like, because the zombies themselves, they were like, you, stuff like that. I think it was like the last little piece of his humanity trying to resist, but it didn't. No, talking zombies is a bit of a grey area in Resident Evil, but it's better than what happened in Vendetta. Jesus. That child's just creepy and rubbish. Now, at least Brad's heartfelt with his sorry,
Meanwhile, the Ganados are completely fine.
They swear at me in Spanish all the time.
They can still tell you where the nearest train station is. It's in Spanish.
Well, I actually feel kind of bad because straight after that, Carlos goes, "I've got this," and they're like, "Oh, but I don't want." He didn't mean anything by it, Carlos. Right, I'll punch him and get it.
So on my first playthrough, I heard Tyrell say over the radio, "Just ignore him, run by him," and because of that cutscene, that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
Right, I didn't bother hitting him. I didn't want to hit him because of that. What just happened?
I just
ran by him and ran into the station. However, this meant I had a really rough time in the police station because I didn't have the ID card, so I didn't get a lot of really important stuff, like the scope, for instance, which is pretty much crucial now. I played it a second time.
I actually did kind of similar on my first playthrough. I killed Brad. And as the final shot landed, Tyrell said the door's open, so I ran straight to the door. Didn't realise that Brad even dropped anything, so I killed him and then didn't get the reward. So, and I just thought, oh, these boxes will be here. They need a stars card. Oh, Jill will be coming through here later. Then maybe, and maybe that's just something to keep some supplies in reserve for her. So I had the same thing where I didn't get the scope or any of the extra ammo as well. And now, reading the file Note to a Friend from Resident Evil 3 2020, Smiley, who you can follow on Twitter at PRCat88.
Hector, if you're reading this, I'm already dead. If you hear any noises coming from the locker, do not open it. Please. While you were out on patrol, I focused on finding a way to get to the other side. I realized that explosives might be our best bet. I managed to rig up a pretty good bomb, but we don't have any batteries for the detonator. I'm pretty sure I sent one to the safety deposit room during intake last week. We need that battery if we're going to knock this wall down. So I headed upstairs to find you since I know you have the safety deposit room key. As soon as I left the shower room, I was attacked. One of them bit me. I washed the wound as best as I could, but I feel worse and worse. I hope I don't need to spell out why you must not open that locker. Please don't worry about me. Just get yourself out of here as fast as you can. Your buddy, Wes. P.S. Don't worry about that $600 I lent you. Think of it as a gift toward your upcoming move. Good luck, buddy.
Right, so with characters out of the way, let's move on to creatures. So this one's an interesting one. We do have some cuts, but we also have, I guess, a lot of the key components are still here. As we knew, the Drain Demos are back. They are redesigned, and as I said on the demo podcast, I do like the new design. They made me quite skittish, especially with their new ability, which is incredibly annoying. The Palehads were back. They're canon to this universe now, and also annoying. As we previously mentioned, Lick has made a nice return appearance, non-stun lockable. And the Gammas and the Betas are here as well, but we'll get to that. Obviously, the big cut We talked a lot about how to improve RE3 Remake over the original would be to add more bosses. We got less this time around. The Gravedigger is completely cut from the game, and continuing the kind of lack of spiders and the lack of crows from Remake 2, neither of those came back. Which to me, here's a theory for you, side theory for you. The Code Veronica remake can't happen now because there's, nobody has the balls to make spiders in a Resident Evil remake. And you can't do CV without spiders and moths, so ergo, no CV remake. Kidding aside, how do we feel about the general overview of creatures? Jordan, start us off.
Well, it's a nice variety. Obviously, I can't say that I miss the ones that were omitted because I didn't play the original.
Yeah,
I think I've said that I've said that enough now. But the characters that were there, I think are very well designed in just how horrible and gross they were. I particularly like, is it Hunter Gamma?
That's the sewer ones.
Blob
yeah,
in the sewers. Yeah. I obviously like. I like the idea that it practically encompasses the whole of the hallway. I like the idea of there being these enemies which are basically saying you ain't getting past. You've got to fight your way through me. Although if you walk too far back, they just turn away and they skit off, and it's really funny. Because they got those little legs, and they just like run off with the big blobby head, and you're like, oh, okay, it's not that scary. It's not like it's pursuing me and stuff like that. Paleheads were cool. I mean, it's kind of it's got a little bit of regenerative vibe. It's weird because they're quite sort of simplistic in their look and design, but they're still unsettling. But yeah, just in general, it's following much in the same vein as Remake 2. You can't really say anything about the zombies, I suppose, because they're all pretty much the same zombies. But that was the one that stood out to me was Hunter Gamma.
Nice, fair enough. I'm in agreement with that in a way. I loved that. So in the original RE3, they barely show up. Really, you can run straight past them. There's one room where they're guaranteed to be there, and you can run straight out, and then they might show up again later. So they're unfortunately not really in the game much. So this time they got a little bit of limelight. They're pretty easy to get through, but it was nice to see them given their own sort of whole area and a little bit of lore as well, with the files kind of explaining that they were regarded as failures, but one of the scientists basically couldn't let go. I really like that whole section. Steve, how do you feel about the overview of creatures?
Generally, I liked a lot of them. Like, obviously the emissions are a bit of a shame, but I do like what we got. I would argue that Gravedigger lives on in the Gamma's face.
Yeah.
Like, why even bother putting the dogs in is my question, because there are like two of them in the game on normal mode. Why you could have used that asset for something.
You're right. There's two instances, I think, and I remember this because the second time they appeared, I said out loud, "Oh yeah, there's dogs in this game." So
yeah, there's more in the hard difficulties, but what's the point? Like you could have put something more interesting in the place.
Yeah, that's fair.
The revised Drain Demos are absolute swines. Like, if you get the bad RNG and they keep landing that grab and you don't see it coming and they spawn behind you, you just like, I'll just be parasitized for the entirety of this event, shall I?
Yeah.
I do like them as a whole because, that's the first face hugger style enemy we've had in a while.
Yeah.
Like, where they can actually infect. And I would argue parasite status is infinitely worse than poison status because it not only drains your health if you die, you get one of the most disgusting death scenes in the game.
Oh, I'll have to look that one up.
A lot of horrible death scenes, yeah. Now, the Gammas, I like them. Like, I kind of feel bad for the classic fans, because the classic fans, they basically were hunters with a big head that could swallow you.
Yeah.
Whereas now, they're not even hunters anymore, just a big mouth on legs.
Well, yeah.
They kind of remind me, their actual aesthetic reminds me of Resident Evil Revelations 1, that kind of wet, bloated, dead skin look. And I think it looks really good on them. I know it sounds peculiar to say that, but it looks really good on them. Like, they should wear that out more. The new star of the show, however, my God, the Hunter Betas. Oh, they I'd say they look more intimidating than I was expecting, but their actual moveset makes me want to just like eat pad. Like, I know James is probably going to say this in a second, but his first playthrough, he only got insta-killed by them once. They killed me more than Nemesis did, the swines. Like,
yeah, I had my first experience with them ended that way with my head.
Somewhere in Capcom they've got like the whiteboard. It's what make hunters more relevant than lickers. Yeah, okay.
I mean, to be honest, as a fan, that's the way I feel that it should be. So I was really happy with the way that they handled them. They're different, but they're really great. The way they move, and yeah, very very impressed with how well they pulled that one off.
Oh, definitely. They're just absolute.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I do know. James, how do you feel about the roster of creatures?
I'm gonna touch on something I was talking about earlier on. Zombies feel a little bit more automated. And the scripted zombies. I don't think there was any scripted zombies, as I call them, in Remake 2. Or if they were, I didn't see them because they were off shot. But there was a lot of little jiggery pokery that was happening with the zombies behind the camera that you don't see, such as zombies just disappearing,
right?
Just straight up disappearing, which completely threw me off. In fact, it's not just zombies; it's every monster. If you just skip to a certain plot point. But yeah, 4 shots to the head. They normally go down. Stab them. If they reach out once, they're probably not dead. Keep stabbing, and they're down. Dogs I've always had trouble with, and when you see them, you're in a really tight corridor, and it's pretty hard to attack them. But yeah, you guys are right. Like, they could have been removed. They weren't really a big, like, it wasn't really a big reveal. It was like they were just shoehorned in there for that section. Next up, the Drain Demos. So I have, although that section was really creepy and really well done, it reminded me of Alien Isolation, and I was right at home. I turned into frickin' Ellen/Amanda Ripley in those corridors, and I was just blasted away with my shotgun. Those demosses. I never had the death animation, but now I kind of want to do it because I want to see what it looks like.
It's weird. That whole area is like the aesthetic of Dead Space.
It is. Yeah, necromorph kind of thing. Yeah. But yeah, really like I did like him, but they weren't too much of a trouble with me. Then there's Hunter Gammas, which again, not really much of a problem if you have a grenade launcher or a shotgun and you just are patient. And then Hunter Beaters is where the game F's me. Like, Hunter Beaters, and you know, on my second playthrough, it absolutely crapped me up. If you I had a sixth sense moment. So when you were going through the hospital and you're going down one of the corridors, on my second playthrough, I didn't notice on my first, but a hunter just rushes by you down a corridor, right? And it like sent shivers down my spine. That was on the second playthrough, right? And then later on, I think that, I mean, I'm not going to say that was the reason, because I feel like it was just because pressure is streaming maybe, and also being late. But yeah, I think that kind of added to me dying upwards maybe more than 10 times to the first hunter, and then continually dying to them because I just couldn't get the timing right. They are tough, and considering everything else in the game I found at that point was easily kind of you could easily send it off if you were just clever. The hunters are, no, that's pure instinct. You have to just be better than they are. Right. And it's just, that's really cool because it just changes the game up.
Yeah, for sure.
Is Nemesis going to be a different section?
No, let's do Nemesis now.
Right. So first Nemesis iteration, when you see him when he's all black binned up, like
midliner Nemesis.
Terminator Nemesis, he's kind of okay. he looked cool. Then when his hat comes off, it's a bit weird. I wasn't really that scared of him, right? But then when Beep can't swim and then he jumps onto the bridge, I was like, whoa, this game just got really cool. Right? Because immediately I was seeing very Miyazaki Dark Souls-ish kind of vibes from that boss. And I went into Dark Souls mode with the boss in when you faced him in that square, and then later on when you face him as well. I just got
Bloodstarved Nemesis. Sorry,
it really is. It looks like the Bloodstarved Beast. Yeah, and I just went really balls to the wall with him, and he looks so cool when he's in his stage 2 and stage 3, and then his stage 4 is it's a blobby Resident Evil monster.
Yeah.
So I kind of what's it called? Has it got a name?
No.
Is it just stage 4?
Final Nemesis? I don't know.
You're getting a bit skewed, James. The stage 1, which is bipedal, stage 4, which is quadruped, and then the stage 3.
I thought stage 2 was quadrupedal.
Yeah,
stage 2 is quadrupedal, yeah.
And stage 3 is the blob.
There's sort of a mid stage for stage 2 where he's got a tentacle arm instead of a normal.
I thought he got bigger after the bridge stage, but
no.
Okay.
You could also just name it after the different achievements you get based on which type you've just defeated. Because it's like Nemesis down, Nemesis down, Nemesis down, Nemesis down.
If we're talking Nemi, though, am I the only one who loved bipedal Nemesis? Like, the time he drops that rocket launcher, I get chills. Like, oh, God. Damn. Fire that thing at me, leather daddy. Let's go. Like, God damn, bipedal. I mean, talk about underused. Like, I can feel like all the people whining about Mr. X and RE2 Remake has kind of nerfed him. Like, because the only time Nemesis truly scares the daylights out of me is the first time he appears as an in-game threat. Like, when you got to run to the power station and back. Like, he's deadly. But after that, he's set PC. He owns the set pieces he's in. He's fun, and every scene he's in's a delight. But he's underutilized somehow, despite being the main focus threat. He's underutilized.
Right, exactly. I love the design, and like you say, I love the pieces where he shows up. When he shows up with the rocket launcher and all those moments, and the further mutations. Sorry, excuse me. And but I just feel like he did lack a lot of presence, which is a shame. You know, he's not the first stalker in the series, but he's sort of the one that everyone remembers. He's the truest stalker, if you like. And they just sort of neutered him there. You know, I thought I was getting fatigue from Mr. X and Jack Baker a little bit. But, I kind of missed it. Though the moments that he does show up where he can drop out of the air, Batman style or whatever, are enjoyable. There's just not many of them. And after a certain point, basically after you get on the subway train, that's it, isn't it? You know, because then he becomes the bipedal monster and he only shows up for cutscenes and boss fights. So, yeah, it's a bit of a shame. In a way, it's nice because you don't have to worry too much about, when's he going to show up in the way that T-103 is standing outside the door and, this is becoming a problem now and I'm getting a bit irritated about trying to get round him maybe.
I had a slightly different reaction to that because I constantly tried to keep myself equipped in case I was about to walk into another Nemesis boss fight.
Sure. Just
because of the way the story went. But yeah.
Maybe that's the way it should have been. Like maybe I should have had that feeling that maybe he could have come back. But I felt like after the clock tower, that was probably it in terms of stalker. That would have been a nice shock, if they'd have had him stalking you around as the.
Yeah, I think if we both had the exact same reaction, if we both had the reaction to kind of be wary, it would have been a bigger success. But I say it is a little bit sort of diminished, and it was hard to follow up what they did with Mr. X because they were, it was really competent with that. I said when we were looking at the sort of the first reveal of the new Nemesis design that I wasn't necessarily in love with the changes that they made. I think it was just because while I did play a game, it's like I could see the renders, I could see the artwork of Nemesis throughout the years, and he's always been terrifying. And I just I don't know, it felt like he was almost a little too familiar.
Right, yeah.
And when it got to the fight after the bridge, I think it like follows like straight after the bridge, and every now and then he takes a break to go and have some zoomies, and he just like runs around like an energetic dog. I don't know. I felt a little bit sort of detached from it. It's like decent boss, and I think it. If you were to sort of like look at the models, some really nice designs there.
Sure.
But yeah, I was missing that presence. Definitely didn't have that moment that everybody had with Mr. X, where he's like pushing away the helicopter, and you see Mr. X for the first time in his full, trench coat and hat, and it's scary. It's a real presence, and Nemesis, unfortunately, I didn't feel he had that.
Yeah,
I think one wall bust, doesn't he? And that's
it.
Yeah, which I missed the first time. I don't know how. Like there's no sort of like corrective camera for those cinematic moments, so you could just be looking the other way. And I think I happened to be looking back at the building as I was walking along, and then I just heard, and I'd seen it from the gameplay trailers and stuff like that, so I knew it was going to happen. But I was kind of like, oh, I missed one of the big moments of the game.
I think maybe that feeling would have been alleviated if there was another area for him to stomp around in, because really the only bit where he gets to do traditional Nemesis things is downtown, which A, we all kind of knew fairly well from the demo anyway, and B, you've got to run through it several times, so you get the layout down pretty easy, you can get in and out, do what you got to do. That's the only time that you have to deal with him in the situation, where he's got that move set where he can grab you and all that good stuff. It's really hard to contend with him on harder difficulties. But it's so brief, unfortunately, that it doesn't really leave an impact.
It boggles my mind. Sorry.
No, go on, Steve. Go on.
It boggles my mind that he had such a diverse and complex move set in that sequence. And he literally can do that, like bipedal, no weapons Nemesis is only 2 times. Walking to put the power on, and then it's walking back to the train station. There's 3 times technically. You can blow him up with a barrel as well. It's like, why even bother with that much effort to then use him for...
Right, yeah.
It's got to be some kind of counterbalance for people complaining about this.
Very possible,
that's what it feels like.
Very possible.
That's probably why they save rooms every 2 seconds as well.
There was one moment, when it's like running away from Nemesis, and I couldn't tell whether it was just purely scripting trying to course correct or whether there was some kind of glitch. It happens when you're making your way back to the subway station, and Nemesis shows up in front of the gate, and basically so he shows up, he drops down, and I decided to fight him, so I bring him down, throw a couple of explosives, and then I run back to the gate, and he drops down again, and I just had to run past him and just sort of basically be chased by him to the subway. And I have no idea if that was sort of the intention of the design, but he immediately revived, which was really weird.
Yeah, I think there's an event at that line and you just triggered it again, I guess.
Yeah.
That's a shame.
Anyone been in the toy shop while Nemesis is following you?
That's great.
He just stares at you knowing you have to come back out, and it's so creepy. I love that.
Yeah,
that or he's browsing the windows.
It's like, are you coming back out then?
He's thinking, can he fit in that Mega Man suit? That's what it is. I actually took a screenshot of him looking through the window. I found it so funny. I was like, is this going to be a moment that people overlook? But apparently not. So good on bringing that up. So let's talk about locations, I think. For me, my favourite sort of half of the game is the first half. As much as we've talked about how you do run through the same area a few times, I kind of like that dynamic of getting through downtown in a few different ways. I like the substation. I particularly like the sewers. That's what I wanted the game to be. That's the part of the game that I enjoyed the most. A real stickler, unfortunately, and a lot of people pointed this out, this is where some of the harsher cuts come into play after this. I knew immediately when I was having that boss fight with Nemesis that we weren't going in the clock tower, and that wasn't going to be a part of this game. There's no Raccoon Park or anything like that, and there's no Dead Factory, which is, again, that, mess with the lore and stuff like that. But, I wasn't so hot on the second half of the game. They just seemed a bit shallow to me and didn't really have a whole lot of character. And, to be honest, the name Nest 2, when I read it on a file, I did audibly groan. just it's a bit, straightforward. And my other note is, did anyone else get really bad, like, laser-based anxiety when they're walking into Nest 2? You've got, like, a long hallway where you follow Tyrell with all these lights. I just had this horrible feeling that we were going to have a laser corridor.
See, I didn't have that, but I did feel like I was walking through a Mass Effect 2 level.
Yeah, actually, no, that's fair.
Like, it's all Cerberus colour schemes. Like, if you know Mass Effect 2, Cerberus colour scheme is white, yellow, and black, and that's everywhere. That's not Umbrella colours.
Mm. Well,
You're worried about getting into an elevator because it might load for 20 minutes.
Yeah. So I heard Umbrella stuff is like really cool, Rex. Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, we just heard Steve's Rex voice.
That was the worst Rex. My real Rex is more serious and gross.
It was almost like he was in the room.
Yeah, wow.
Steve, how do you feel about the locations as a whole?
I'm almost a counterpoint. Sorry, this is weird, right? I actually appreciate the revised hospital.
That's one of my favourites as well. To be fair, I should point that out. That's a strong point of the second half.
Yeah. Although it's not anything visually new, and it's almost like a beat for beat repeat of how you do the area. The RPD revisit with a new character who's, quipping and his one-liners. They keep it, fun. Fun little jaunty re-jog through the RPD. I actually kind of like the idea of what Nest 2 is, but it looks too clean and clinical compared to the original Dead Factory.
You also get a flash drive in 1999 or 98. I mean,
they had one in the Stars badge was a USB.
Yeah. Oh, that's true as well. Yeah.
But Jill does look confused as to the concept of a flash drive, despite she should have had one.
That's very true.
Still waiting on them to sell those, by the way.
Yeah.
But overall, the thing that this. I liked the area. I like the idea that there's the big glass shutters that are sealed down, so you can never go into the full lab. The idea that they actually did think about it being compromised, but I think it drew me the hell out when we get to the big septic tank drill room, or pouring melting things down room, and then the rail gun range that has a rate of 30 meters. When it's a rail gun, guys, you'd know that I'd go further than 30 meters. I mean, it's better than a random generator room, I suppose. But it's still so. The concept of having Umbrella having a anti-Umbrella lab, and then having an Umbrella biohazard countermeasure service that does not know about the Umbrella. What? I like the visuals, but there's stuff that confuses me. But favorite area overall standout probably is somewhere between the city and hospital. I want to say the hospital because the atmosphere in there is.
No, for sure, definitely, yeah. James, any favourite or least favourite locations?
My favourite is the hospital. I love the hospital, even though it. I remember Steve was, bless him. He was my first playthrough. He was contacting me saying how I was doing, and he gave me some really good tips, which really helped. But I think the first thing I said to him was, "Wow, this hospital area is really cool." The rest of the game is very action orientated and running away and just kind of, just all about running and shooting. Whereas the hospital is slowed down a whole bunch. And then you have, it's more like an RE2 experience. You have to take your time or else, because there's zombies everywhere. And then you got the hunters later on. Least favorite? I would say is it not Nest 2, the facility above it.
Right, yeah. Like the warehousey area.
Yeah. I don't like that area because it confused me.
Oh, Nikolai's torture dungeon.
Yeah, exactly. It confused me. I couldn't quite pass myself around it. But I like downtown. I love the sewers. When I got through it, I think on my first playthrough, it took me about 20 minutes to get through that sewer. And then when I went through it yesterday, it took me minutes.
Yeah.
5-6 minutes. And that's cool. That's cool level design. Because it's you can actually get through this really, really fast if you just know where you're going. So it's a hospital right at the top, which is funny because it's not even technically like it's Carlos / Jill. It's not even Jill who's the main protagonist.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, the sewer, same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. It's more of a Carlos location because Jill's sort of route around the hospital is just to pick up some supplies before you move on, and don't do what I did and accidentally leave the Magnum behind. Jordan, any favourite or least favourite locations?
Well, first of all, I particularly liked the way that they handled the police department. It's kind of great to go there again. Again, this kind of like this experience works best, obviously, if you are coming off Remake 2 and, just sort of treat those as a whole sort of enveloped experience. Especially because if you have played that game within a certain time frame, you're going to remember the location of things like the liquors. And they're still there. And, in particular, like the liquor hallway by the Stars office, I was dreading going there.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, if there's liquors about, like, it's most likely still going to be in the same hallway. So I was not looking. I was both pleased and terrified that it was there. It's like brilliant. Like that's that's something that we as players can understand the layout, and it just kind of gives you a bit of a heads up. I would say that just like the downtown area, just being able to kind of go outdoors a lot more in this game is what I liked obviously the most about it. Lots of buildings to kind of go in and out of, and you get to see plenty of them, and it's really well designed. I didn't have to check my map much of any of the game, and that's not a mark on it being linear, because while that is the case, you still have to navigate your way through alternate different paths when you've got objectives to do. It's just a really nice, clean layout to just about every section of the game, but especially in the downtown. When there's a lot of deliberate sort of decorative destruction and debris that is meant to block off different paths. Despite that, really nice and easy to navigate, and so much variety to it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we talked about presentation a little bit, so we'll probably be pretty light on this one. We talked about, the facial capture. I think in terms of, again, unfortunately, a problem with the engine is the lip sync. I'm fairly certain we can all agree with that, or maybe that was just a me thing. But every time I've played it through, it's been okay in places, but atrocious in others, unfortunately. But other than that, the game looks great. It might be the best looking game in the series. It certainly has the best character models. I thought the city looked fantastic, and made me infinitely more curious about things like Stagler, which we see briefly, in the Clock Tower again, which we see briefly. But the absolute 100% standout for me as a long-term fan was the soundtrack, how they went back and sort of fixed the complaint of Remake 2's lack of referencing old music. In fact, they fixed the RE2 save theme. It actually loops now. When you go back to the RPD, they snuck that in there. And obviously we experienced some of the music in the demo, like the save theme, the RE3 save theme, and the Nemesis theme and stuff. But when City of Ruin started playing in that alleyway, and again, City Without Hope, as you're going over the sort of fire truck towards Kendo's gun shop, sort of just that familiar, warm feeling of, this song, I thought it was brilliantly well done. They did it at a good pace without it being, a big nostalgia fest. They dropped them in there at nice times. Overall, how do we feel about the presentation, James?
So I agree. The music was fantastic. I was constantly referring to other games that it sounded very similar to, but it wasn't in a derogatory way. It was just like, it just reminded me of those games, but it wasn't quite the same. Or movies, in fact. Like, there was a lot of Terminator in there. I heard that a lot, but it worked, and the sound design was great. The guns sounded fantastic.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I'd tell you what, it should have freaked me out more, but as I said earlier on, I think my Alien Isolation brain got on, but the music in the power station is really creepy.
Yeah.
Like when because it's just loud enough that you have to really hear out. Because if you don't, you know they're around if the music's starting, but you have to really hear if they are near you, right? Because you can hear the on the walls, and it's really neat, really cool sound design there. I've already gone over like the voices and stuff, but yeah, I agree that the lip syncing. I think the worst portion of it was where Nikolai comes out from a side room with Tyrell, and Carlos and Jill are coming back to the subway station, and Nikolai's words do not match up to his face at all.
Yeah, Nikolai seems to get the brunt of the bad lip sync, it feels like. Yeah,
and it's I think this was just because how beautiful his face is. They just want to focus on that face. But you can definitely see the lip sync problems there. But yeah, the monsters all look grotesque and disgusting, like they should. I tell you, there was one bit. Actually, if we're talking presentation, there's one bit I got a bit lost in because suddenly, even though we got downtown, I always knew there was a place to go, but the place where I turned, I walked into it and I went, oh wait, and it was just before the bridge where Jill says her can't swim line. I was like, oh wait, has this game turned into an open world game? I've got so much space here and there's nothing here. What's going to happen? Because you got the entire river, and you got this bridge, and you got this open area. Right, and I was like, it was a really cool lead up to the boss fight because I knew something was going to happen, and I was waiting for something to jump out of that water or something to come out of the sky. Because I think moments before that, you hear him howl through the city as well, which is awesome. But yeah, I loved the way they presented the game. They knew what they were doing in terms of action and everything, and they did their best with it.
I think especially that's quite cool about that area that you were talking about, the open area, is that immediately after that boss fight you go to the hospital, which might be the most claustrophobic area in the game. Jordan, how did you feel about the overall presentation of the game?
Lovely. It's again great follow up to Remake 2. Obviously it was able to expand upon the soundtrack. Resident Evil 2 safe theme sounds so good now. I don't know if there was a full version of it before. In Remake 2, I seem to think it was only the little signature at the beginning, but the actual full version in Resident Evil 3 is terrific. Obviously, it's not overly prevalent. Those themes are there, but I don't feel like they've necessarily changed too much of their stance on how much they want the music to kind of play a role, largely because they've got atmosphere that they're trying to drum up in different ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, like overall, it's really it's a really tight package of both visuals and the sounds. I think like places like the hospital when you first get there, it's one of the more sort of obvious examples of using lighting to mood the scenes. But it's throughout the game. There's so many kind of well lit portions that just either signify that you're about to enter a tough stretch or you're getting some respite. There's some really nice colors to kind of signify whether or not you are sort of in danger or whether you're kind of going through an area that you can kind of take a bit of a breather. Overall, I mean, that lip sync issue, I noticed that more like in like the gameplay, where there's it's just sort of something that they probably did in about a week. It's like, right, here's all these dialogue lines, move the mouth a bit to kind of match it. They might not have even had that. They might have just had something in the code which just kind of measures the sound waves and then kind of animates the characters like that. But obviously that was something that was missing. It's like the only bit of the game that lacks polish. Just about everything else is, fantastic. And obviously, as we said before, the story really stands up, as practically being its own movie. And that's largely because of how good the visuals are in presenting it all. You could easily, if you had no interest in playing any of the Resident Evil games, you could easily watch this and Remake 2 as movies, and you'd never feel like you were kind of just watching a game, if that makes sense.
No,
It feels more like it's akin to CGI movies, which is weird because years ago that was like the big goal, to finally have games that kind of look like that, and now it's here and it's almost normal. But
absolutely,
to give it its credit, it's definitely one of the nicest looking games out there coming out this year,
for sure. And Steve, round us out. What's your view on the general presentation of the game?
Generally, I can't knock it. As everyone said, the lip syncing issue. Whenever anyone's talking outside of a cutscene, they kind of like robots. They have done since like Revelations.
Yeah.
But the musical score, I think they took on the chin the criticism from it.
Yeah.
The musical score was very understated. And this one, some of the tunes, like beat for beat, almost. That they are remixes. A lot of them are remixes. But there is no need for a classic soundtrack this time. Because the classic soundtrack is here and they've made it modern and it works. The atmosphere themselves that they convey, aside from the nitpicks of the voice acting, I'd say is fairly damn good. Like the RE Engine stuff, they know how to work it down there. They know how to set a scene, as everyone else kind of said. There is a few reused assets. We joked about it on my when I did a stream to test it for PC. But I think that's an RE Engine thing. That's there's a single tarp we were joking about a million times.
Yeah.
But no, the actual way that they've constructed these areas, they've lit these areas, soundtracked and scored them. There's no reason to complain about them. They're just so well done. And like Jordan has said, this obviously there would have been fans that they had their feathers completely rustled if it was. But this could have been an RE Engine built movie, and it would have been fine. This is. Truly, in that regard, phenomenal. I feel like I'm just trending over.
No, absolutely. You've made some salient points, definitely.
Every shot is considered. Surely a lot of them are homages, but even Nemesis, like I said to self, that the Nemesis scene, literally, whenever he shows up and he's doing something, or being a complete pain, like grabbing Jill round the head for the 500th time, he has an air of menace and cruelty that you just can't. I haven't seen them carry across before. You've had Wesker's snark, and there's genuine malice in this creature, and it's toying with you most of the time. Nemesis, it gives off this air like he could kill you whenever he wanted to, and he's just having fun. There's something about the way he behaves when he picks up the rocket launcher, or he's pointing the flamethrower at you, and he's enjoying every second of it.
Yes, yeah, that's true actually, and that all comes down to the direction.
Yeah, exactly. They know how to make. He isn't the best stalker in gameplay terms, but as an actual storyline of being a stalker, he's phenomenal. He's god tier above anything else. Which sounds like I'm just giving him praise after praise. I do like the transition from Alien, from Terminator to Alien Queen is kind of interesting as well. I don't know the full ins and outs of the NE Parasite lore, okay, but didn't it have something just to go a bit off topic, right? Lisa Trevor, okay, she got given the parasite first, and then the G virus was discovered. Is that
that's
the way
correct?
It went?
Yeah.
So does that mean then that there's potentially G virus level stuff in the parasite? Because some of those transformations, they're a bit response to trauma-y, kind of over the top in the same way Birkin.
Right, I wondered that as well. I believe the theory is, and I could be wrong on this, but this is what I think is correct, is that the progenitor basically spawns or spins off slightly into the G virus in order to destroy the parasite that they put inside of her. Because obviously the G virus is very adaptable. That's the point of it. So I think it comes from the progenitor to destroy the parasite. So I'm not necessarily sure there is any G virusiness in the parasite, but there is. Obviously he's got the whole tentacle thing, and he always has, which is very much a Nemesis thing. But he's also got some G elements in there as well.
and you can now parasitize. I mean, we haven't even touched on the parasites on.
Yeah.
And they're an entirely new enemy type. That's a complete pain. Very vulnerable to grenades, speedrunners. I mean, everything's very vulnerable to grenades. I think the Licker, the Hunter, Nemesis is allergic to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who would win, the Ultimate Stalker or One Splody Boy? But it's real, because that stuff I wasn't expecting at all. Like Nemesis to make babies, so to speak. Like Birkin technically does.
That's true. Actually,
they're kind of rubbish. Like, they don't make more of themselves. They just like attach a face lump to another being, and that'd be it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's cool on the same. And I know, have we talked about pale heads enough, and how they are like basically a substitute for naked zombies, and you shoot them until they stop smoking, guys. That's how they stay dead.
Oh, okay, good to know. I mean,
sounds like the title for a new book. Have we talked about pale heads enough?
Pale head seems like a reasonable nod to the Crimson Head concept in an unkillable or resurrecting.
Yeah, I wonder if we'll ever get any lore on really, like some true lore on the background of those. But I think it was a nice way to sort of reference the sort of modified / naked zombies of previous games by throwing them in the lab there at the end.
I mean, they were always more durable in the older game.
Yeah, exactly.
I wonder if we'll ever see a pale head podcast.
So. Before, I'm going to try and wrap us up a little bit. Before we get to sort of overall final impressions, we have to talk about the big dispute, I think, is that everyone is throwing at this game is the length. Personally, I disagree, but I'll save my piece. Jordan, how did you feel about the length of Remake 3?
Well, obviously I've seen the discussion, as you all have. It's difficult these days, because I think that trying to kind of put a monetary value on a game's length or vice versa is tricky. I mean, nobody is going to question the design prowess of Platinum Games, and yet just about every one of their top titles, every one of their campaigns can be completed in a handful of hours. No one's saying anything bad about games like Vanquish, but you can still beat that in like 4 or 5 hours. I don't know if I'm the best authority on this, because frankly, if there is a game that I really want and really enjoy, it doesn't really matter so much about the length or the price if it's got a great experience. I bought Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes, and that got a lot of flack for its price point. Called a glorified demo, turned out to be the game I probably put more hours into that year than ever. So I don't necessarily know if I'm the best authority on it, but what I would say is that it's a solid campaign. There's absolutely no fat whatsoever. There's nothing that repeats, and you're not getting any kind of Ubisofting of lots of additional quests and grinding and lots of unnecessary gunk that doesn't necessarily get questioned as much in comparison to just shorter games in general. I don't think there's necessarily a problem. I think the reservations people have is that if you didn't include Resistance, you could maybe take off a quarter of the price point.
Yeah, that's fair. It's kind of, it's difficult to argue with, because obviously some of it comes down to what your opinion on Resistance is. Obviously, some people are very much turned off by that game immediately just because of sort of the concept, and that's fine if that's not their interest. Then that's what it is, and I can kind of see why they'd be, a little bit sour about dropping full price on Resident Evil 3 and not playing the game that comes with it. Because for me, it's well worth the money for me, but that's because I'm very excited to play more of Resistance. Spoiler alert for that podcast, I had a great time playing it so far. So obviously, yeah, it's maybe it's just mileage may vary. James, how did you feel about the length of the game?
So I don't really look too much into kind of discussions like this, because I feel like they can go round and round about. Sure. But my personal opinion is that if it is what I would call an epic style game, which is a game that is like 40, 50 pounds, and it's being advertised as a game that has hours and hours of fun, in terms of its main story, right? Then it's £1 an hour for me, right? So if I'm going to get at least 40 to 50 hours out of a game, right, then I'm completely okay with that. Now, Resident Evil is different because Resident Evil promotes replayability.
Yes.
Right. So, and Resident Evil 3 is Resident Evil 3 is the first Resident Evil that Remake 2 kind of did it, but Remake 3 made me want to play it again. I played it the first time and I was like, I want to play it again, but I'm way too tired. Okay, I'm going to wait till tomorrow and then I'm going to play it.
Yeah.
And now I put 10 hours into it already. Right. I know I'll put more into it. Right. That's replayability. That's getting my money, my James money worth, because I'm putting those hours in. Right. And I'm enjoying every minute of it. Right. As long as you feel like it doesn't matter if the game's short or not. Right. Capcom aren't dumb. Right. They know how to do a game. They've been doing it for a very long time. And yeah, I feel you could get tens and tens of hours into this game, hundreds or more, especially with Resistance as well.
Yeah.
On top of that, which that's another subject. But just Resident Evil 3, you could get some mileage out of it just through replayability because they've got like that little store thing they've got, which is pretty cool to see if you can break your time. They've got little challenges. They've got nice little bonuses. It's a different kind of game, and I'm used to playing epic games which take hundreds of hours to complete. But yeah, Resident Evil is a different kind of genre, and Resident Evil 3 is a game that you can really replay and have some fun with. So I don't think the shortness is even a factor, and I think it's being overly criticized.
Right, yeah. I think you've definitely hit the nail on the head. I think some people who make that complaint obviously don't see it the same way, that its replayability is a big factor. And I found it really interesting that Remake 2, obviously it was a big moment and it deserved those big scores because, it's changed up the play style here a lot and brought the horror back whilst retaining a very easy to pick up and play kind of play style by opting for over the shoulder, which everyone's very familiar with. But it got such high scores compared to this game. I think for the illusion of length. Resident Evil 3 has its replayability. Yeah, you're playing the same campaign over and over again on different difficulties to do different challenges to get, faster run times and stuff like that. Resident Evil 2 Remake, you're playing it over and over again. There's 4 campaigns apparently, but they're all essentially the same. So it's really no difference. So I think the people that are finding ways to score these games differently are just looking at it because the menus told them something different this time around. Whereas Remake 2 was like, Claire A and second, and Leon first and second. They're all, pretty much the same, and they're all sort of the length of Resident Evil 3 as well. So maybe it's a perception thing, definitely. Steve, how did you feel about the length?
So this is obviously a loaded gun. I've got a few things to say on this.
Sure.
But, I've already bought this game. I've got it on the Xbox. I've had it since Friday, so that's a time recording. It's about 5 days ago. 100% of both of them.
Nice.
I'm more than content to, when I have the money, do it again so I can play with the guys on PS4 with the Resistance. Now, that's fine. That's only about 50 hours playtime in total because I'm a gorger. I like to just hammer the living daylights out of it until I've had my fill, and I have not had my fill. So that's cool. I don't like the shop system. I think I would rather the unlock's been tied to, S rank.
Sure, yeah.
But that's by the by, I understand the reason for it because people were whinging for like having a rocket launcher. Again, it's placating the fan base a bit. But the whole idea that the game is too short and stuff, it's a Resident Evil game. It's already got more content than... Oh, sorry, I'm a bit quiet.
Yeah.
Okay, it's already got a bit more content than Resident Evil 7 had at launch, and everyone was very, very content with saying that was the best thing since sliced bread. Now, I enjoyed RE7, but RE7 at launch was just the one campaign with a remix difficulty. This has got 2 remix difficulties. I would argue it's also got a skip button for cutscenes, for speedrunners. Awesome. Then, okay, now I'm going to throw a curveball. I am by no means a fan of this genre of game, but for sake of argument, a Call of Duty game has a campaign of about 4 hours and then a multiplayer mode. Mm-hmm. And your first time through on Resident Evil 3 is probably going to clock in about the 6-7 hour mark, and then you've got Resistance. Why is it those games get like infinite free passes exactly? Mm-hmm. But RE3 is getting blown to hell and back. When I would argue RE3's campaign, the cinematic nature of it, as we've already talked on, would make an epic movie. It's like the best Terminator film to come out in years, and you get to play it. Like, and this is coming from someone who would rate Remake 3 as the bronze medal of the Remake trilogy, if you like. Mm-hmm. So it seems petty to say, oh, it's 2 hours long and you could beat it. No, mate, you're looking for reasons to tear it apart.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of reasons to say that, I mean, RE7, again, just to dial back a bit, that had a slew of content after the fact. This is still an unknown number at this point for RE3. There's rumors already that there's going to be some kind of mini game open world thing, whether that's complete codwash or not, it's been decided.
Yeah.
It's too early to call it as just this is all we get. And if it is, that's fine. There's like at least 3 different variations of campaign difficulty with remixed enemies and remixed items, which is already more than RE7 had. And I would argue the enemy layouts and the weapon changes make it actually arguably more diverse than RE2, because all RE2 had was you had starting off using the Matilda, or I can't remember what player's default little revolver was, or a different handgun.
The quick draw, was it? Quick draw army?
Yeah, the quick draw or the SLS-60. Mm-hmm. Right, so you had a choice between 2 different main handguns, basically the same campaign with their weapon. So there is a lot of variety to be said. Okay? It's just people are being strangely short-sighted about it.
And I think, since there will be potentially people listening to this who are of the opinion that Resistance isn't for them, if you do have an internet connection and you do have your, whatever service of choice, PSN or XBL, at least give it a go, I think. It's come with the game. You've got it free if that's the way you want to look at it. I think give it the time of day as well, because it's nice to have that sort of free packaged in multiplayer experience. Again, we will get to that. But let's wrap up with our final thoughts. How do we feel about this game overall? How do we feel about it, comparing to the original RE3 and for Remake 2? James, why don't you start us off? What's your final verdict on Remake 3?
So my verdict for it, compare it to the old one, is a bit askew, because I watched Steve play the old one, and my only experience playing the game was when 13-year-old James went to Choice's videos to illegally get the game. Please don't come after me, Choices. And yeah, I rented it out and I played it for an hour. It scared the bejesus out of me, so I sent it straight back. But yeah, watching Steve play it looked like a lot of fun. The original, and like it was. I think there was one thing that that remake was missing, and that was the nemesis factor wherever you were. Mm-hmm. Whereas in Remake 3, he felt very scripted, and signposted. He's meant to be here, and he's going to be here. And so it lost a little bit of magic in that way, but in comparison to the old one, right? But it still works because I still enjoy it, and it's still fun because they're still basing it around an action game rather than a horror game at this point, with kind of horror themes aspects to it, and I still love it, and I still want to replay it. In fact, after this podcast, I want to play it again. I want to keep playing it because it is a fun game, and I really, really like Jill, and I like Nikolai, and I like Mikhail, and I like Carlos, and I like Terrell. These names I didn't even know 3 months ago, and now I do. I know these names now. I know who they are, right? And that's because I played Remake 3, and it made me love them.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so that's it. My final in short would be: love the game, keep playing it, get the game if you haven't already. It's super, super fun, and that's what a computer game should be. It should be fun.
Mm-hmm. Times, Jordan, that you haven't played the original RE3, so how would you rate, this remake, and in comparison to Remake 2 as well?
Well, I think as a sort of a not necessarily a standalone game, but as its own individual game. I think it's very well rounded, great experience. I would say that it's a really great follow up to Remake 2, and as I already said, it complements it very well. As a remake, which I spend a lot of time thinking about, what constitutes success with remakes. And sometimes it can be something as drastic as the Resident Evil 1 remake, in which it's so good that it actually eclipses the original in the eyes of many. I don't necessarily think that the experience that you have here is going to be so one-to-one with Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, so you can still kind of go back to that and enjoy that. But I think it's able to take those nods of being more action-oriented and run with it. I think it probably could have been a little bit more ambitious and actually went even further into the action foray. But I could just be, looking at that from just sort of the standard difficulty, and obviously it could be, much more drastic if I play the later difficulties. Overall, I think it's a very solid game, and that's how it should be looked at. Not so much as a remake, but just as its own standalone game. Sure. and what it achieves there. I think we learned that lesson from Resident Evil 2 Remake, where it was so different in a lot of ways that it demanded to be looked at on its own merits. I think it's been, if they decide to not do another remake, perhaps they decide to change the course or go with some new titles or something like that. This has been a real success. These two projects, it's quite crazy to think of, just a couple years ago, we got that first announcement that Remake 2 is happening. And, while it wasn't obviously necessarily what we all expected it to be, it changed the camera angle for one thing, but many other things that followed. I think Capcom have done a really good job of handling two games that are, frankly iconic, not just to the fan base, but just in gaming in general. Yeah. They're well regarded and remembered, and it was always going to be difficult to, succeed with a remake like this. But it's a great year for remakes. This. Final Fantasy VII. I had Link's Awakening before. That's true. And it slots in perfectly. They're all great. Nice. And Resident Evil 3, I'm very happy to say that it stands on its own.
Nice. Okay, Steve, what is your final verdict on this game? Because I know you were struggling for a while on where exactly you landed with it.
Okay, so I enjoyed this game. I think it's a really good, Resident Evil, should we say, experience. Okay, it is not a very good remake. Don't get me wrong. To be fair, if I had to put them side by side, I kind of prefer this game's narrative versus the original RE3. But there's a lot of it that changes, a lot of the way the pace and story flows. And in that regard, calling it a remake seems like we're doing a disservice. It's like, I don't know what, reimagining seems to be the thing people say. But there's a lot of this game's DNA that is very wholly different from its predecessor. Yes, there's still a hospital. There is still a Nemesis. There is still a Jill. But there's a lot that changes it. And therefore, as a remake, it's kind of rubbish. But as an actual Resident Evil game, it's pretty awesome. So I have to give it an 8. If I had to do an out of 10 scale, which seems arbitrary at this point. It's definitely feels more, if this was all we would get and there was no resistance, it could have probably been an expansion pack for Resident Evil 2. And that is by no means knocking it. It's still, I think, worthy of everybody's time. If you enjoyed 2019, or if you have any affinity for Jill and her encounters with Nemesis in the OG, you're still going to have a blast. Yeah. I feel like I'm talking in circles.
I'm in a similar situation where I'm not quite sure. I still haven't quite figured it out.
As a game, I wasn't expecting to exist at all. I wasn't expecting a remake 3. I can turn around and say this is a fun time, and as I've already said, I'm fully intent to, just so I could play with the gang, the Scooby gang that is the FA Spray Pop. and our lovely Discord followers, I will probably be picking this game up again when the money. So it's worth. I think it's worth your time. Whether it's like, I don't know if it's going to be like in the top 5 Resi entries for me, but it's definitely it's up there.
So
I think close to.
yeah. I still can't. So when you're talking about sort of arbitrarily rating it, I actually have here, C, sort of B rank maybe. I don't know. It's on a par for me with Remake 2, I think. They're very different games, but I think I would put them sort of around the same area because they both achieve what they set out to do very well, which is different things, but they both do it with the same amount of success, I think. It was a great ride. Like I said at the beginning, I had a great time playing it, and I'll have a great time playing it more. I think I might even... if my metal tests out, I might even platinum it if I can make it through Inferno. And I wasn't quite as excited to get back to Remake 2 as I am this one. And over the last year, and I think I said probably in our Remake 2 reaction that it was in my top 5. Over the last year, it slipped down a bit. So we'll see where I land with RE3. I think in theory it's incredible. I've got so many compliments about it. It plays great, it looks great, it's exciting, the characters are great, the music's great, the length is, it's good. I'm happy with all of it. But I don't know, there's just something there that doesn't feel quite like a moment like the Resident Evil 2 remake does. It's very strange. Overall, though, it's very strong. Like I say, it succeeds in what it sets out to do. There's no reason not to play it. I'd be interested to see if it gets sort of like post-release support in any way. But I'm happy to own it. I'm happy to own it several times, most likely in the future. And as you said, Steve, it comes with Resistance as well, which is, I'm equally as excited about both games for sure. So, nothing else remains for me but to thank our contributors. If you'd like to be part of the show, then please look into auditioning for our file readings. One way to get in touch is to email us at faspraypod@gmail.com, but of course the best course of action is to join our Discord server where you can discuss Resident Evil with us and other fans and listen to the podcast live as it's being recorded. The link to the server is in the description of this podcast and also on our social media profiles. You can follow us on Twitter at faspraypod, on Instagram at faspraypod, and on Facebook at facebook.com/FASprayPod. You can find us on YouTube, Stitcher, Spotify, and iTunes. And if you enjoyed the show, please do leave us a review where you can. It helps spread the word. So our next episode, you'll have noticed we didn't cover Resistance. As we said, that's coming next. We'll be focusing on our reaction to that as a separate game. So look out for that in the coming weeks and make sure you're following our social medias and our Twitch, since we'll most likely be streaming it from here on out in various ways. And also there may be a sly Resident Evil 3 board game podcast coming sometime down the line as well. Thank you to the panel. You can follow all of the Pueblo people individually. I'm at Cyniac_123, Steve is at Firebutton Games, Jordan is at Cerealbox64, and James is at Moist Owlet OFF. And finally, thank you for listening and have a good week.
It's a shame I didn't get to work out I had a really bad intro gag, which is going to be, you host podcasts. I like podcasts. We'll make this an ongoing arrangement. Just work it in.
I wanted to call... my Adam intro was in the item box that is the Pueblo people. I like to think of this guy as Explosive A. Which I think would be a really cool nickname, but...
Bless him.